Okay, this is Unit 2 from Macro. You should have watched a pre-video that I recorded of not me. It's the daily videos from the My AP Central site, so I'll assign that. If you haven't watched it, please do that. You're going to go over a couple of things. One, you should know what the GDP is, what the definition is. Here it is. Final sale of goods and services produced within a country's domestic borders, right? Produced within their domestic borders. If the U.S. owns a company in Mexico and they produce in Mexico, it does not count in the United States GDP. It only counts if we have any factory owned by any country in the United States. If it's produced in the U.S., it's counted gross domestic product. So how do we add it up? Well, there's two ways that you have to know. There's three ways really, but there's two big ways. One is called the expenditure approach. The other one is called the income approach. The income approach is easy. You add up everyone's income, and it comes to a big number. That's the GDP. Everyone's income added together. The expenditure approach is you have to add up how much spending, how much everybody in the country spends on things. And it's broken up into categories. The first one is consumption plus investment. That's business investment spending. This is consumption of average consumable goods. Then you have investment spending, then government purchases or government spending, plus net exports. What's net exports? It's exports minus imports. Why? Because exports are what we're producing here and shipping elsewhere. Okay? The imports get subtracted because our money's leaving and we're buying else goods, so we subtract what goods are not produced by us, even though we're consuming them. So it's E minus I. A good way to remember that is E comes before I. So E minus I, exports minus imports, gives you net exports. In the US, we have a negative number. Richer countries tend to have a negative trade balance. So because we export way less than we import. We import most of our goods from China currently. So therefore, we have a negative net exports. It reduces our total GDP. All right. So after you've got all that, you need to know a couple of things for the AP exam. What's included in GDP, and more importantly, what's excluded or not included from GDP. So what's included, I wrote a short summary here. There are lists online that are much more detailed. But in general, anything consumed, invested by businesses, government spent, or exports minus imports. So the same thing I wrote up here. But a couple of specifics. Buying a newly built house is counted into GDP. It's counted under investment. Why do I bring that up? Because it doesn't. Students have a hard time with this. Typically, a house's value, people buy a house to live in, yes, but the value of it goes up. When they sell it, they're going to sell it for more. So think of it as someone who builds a house is typically not a human being like you and I. It's a person who's a developer. They have millions of dollars they could spend on building like 8 houses or an apartment complex, and they're going to sell it and make a lot of money off of it. So that's what we're talking about, building and buying a new house. Okay, if you buy an old house, not counted in GDP. It's a used good. So we'll get into that in a second. Over here, a haircut, a cab ride, tanks for the army, teaching high school, a professor in college, commission for selling a stock. A stockbroker makes a commission for selling a stock. The stock itself doesn't count in GDP, but the commission he gets is his income. So that's counted in GDP. What's not counted in GDP? Something called a transfer payment, like Social Security. Nothing is produced. There's no good or service produced in a transfer payment. The easiest example is Social Security. Social Security goes out of my paycheck and it goes into, say, my father's Social Security check. Nothing was produced. Money was just taken out by the government and transferred over to him. That's an example of a transfer payment. Okay. Another not included in GDP, purchase or the sale of the stock or the bond. Students think when you're buying a stock, oh, no, that's a good, isn't it? No. A stock or a bond is not a good. A stock is a ownership of a company. So a transfer of ownership, which is the next one, is not counted in GDP. If I buy an old house, it's not counted in GDP. It's not a new house. New house is counted. Old house not counted. Okay. So purchase of a sale or stock or a bond does not count. The stockbroker makes a commission, right? Income that does count. So that's a good example to remember. Housework not included. You mow your lawn, not included. You pay someone to mow your lawn, included. Okay? Like a landscaper. Unpaid labor, not included. Grandma comes over and babysits for you for 6 hours, not included in GDP. Sorry, Grandma. Illegal activity, not included. Sale of drugs, illegal, not included. Someone does anything illegal, not included in GDP. There's no paper trail. Do economists know it exists? Yes, and they estimate that. All right. Buying an old house, not counted. Off the books work, not counted. Now, those are the things you've got to know, the basics. Now, the second part of GDP, things you should know. Besides that, it generally we'll talk about quality of life in the other videos. GDP is a measure of, higher GDP generally means a higher standard of living. That's why we look at it. This is the number one indicator of the three indices that we look at in this class. So I want to go over quickly how to calculate the GDP. Now, we break GDP down to two things, nominal GDP and real GDP. The word nominal means number. Okay? Nominal means that this is the number value we get when we multiply price of all goods and services times quantity of all goods and services. Okay? So that's how you get GDP. The nominal GDP you take. Now, this might look like a lot of words here. Just focus one at a time, all right? So you have, let's say an economy has two goods. They've got toy cars and they've got toy balls, like blue balls is what I'm thinking of. The little, bouncy handballs, whatever. Doesn't matter. So year one, year two, year three. Okay, in year one, this economy, okay, whatever this economy is, they produce one good, one toy car at a price of $2, and they also produce one blue ball at a price of $1. Okay? So what do? How do you find the GDP for that year? You take the price of the goods that they produce times the quantity of the goods, and you add them together, and done. That's it. That's all you have to do. So the nominal GDP in year one for, we'll call them baseballs, toy cars and baseballs, nominal GDP, 1 times $2, 1 times $2 gives you 2, and then 1 times $1 for the baseballs gives you 1. So then I have a total nominal GDP of $3. I do the same thing for year two. What's the nominal GDP for year two? I take year two, 6 times 3, 6 plus 6 plus 2. 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 2 is 12. I have 30. So the answer is 30. For year three, you can figure it out easy. 8 times 4, 10 times 2, and I've got 8 times 4, 10 times 2, and I add them together, I get 52. That's pretty simple, right? Nominal GDP. Now, there's another formula that you got to know, and that's how to get a percentage change. And it's real simple. You've done it before in other math classes, I know, but all it is you take the quantity of year two, or the year new, right? The new year, the latest one. So year two minus year one over year one times 100. So I might ask you, say, what's the percentage increase or decrease? What's the percentage change in nominal GDP from year one to year two? So I have year one and I have year two, 3 and 30. So year two minus year one over year one times 100. So year two is 30, year one is 3. So 30 minus 3 over 3, 27 over 3 equals 9 times 100. So this economy increased a plus 900%. And that makes sense, right? The number went from 3 to 30, so it went up 900 times. The second question says, how do you get from year 2 to year 3? What's the percentage change in nominal GDP? So now I look for year 2 and year 3. So this is year 3, right? So the new minus old. So 52 minus 30 over old, 30. Got 22 over 30 times 100. I used a calculator, even though you can't use them on the exam, so you wouldn't get this question. So I got 73%. This one increased 73%. Now, the nominal is pretty easy, right? Price times quantity, add them together. If we only had toy cars and not toy baseballs, then we would just say only use these numbers, and that would be your GDP, nominal GDP. But I chose two goods because it makes it a little more complex. So now the second thing you have to know is how to get the real GDP. Mr. Ryan, this is the GDP. It says nominal GDP. No, there's two things, nominal GDP versus real GDP. Real GDP accounts for inflation. Look at the price change from year 1 to year 2. What happened to the prices? The prices went $2, $2, and $4. For here, the price went 1, then it went to 2, then it stayed at 2. So there was inflation. So our total growth is actually this number that we're seeing here, 900%. We actually didn't grow by 9%. We didn't subtract for inflation. So how do you subtract for inflation? Rewrote the same exact graph. Okay? Base year, you have to look at what's called a base year, okay, to find it. In other words, the base year, what's our base year? So to find the real GDP, you must multiply the quantity times the base year price. The new quantity times the base year price. So what do I mean? So let's find the real GDP for year 1. So I've already found the answer, but I'm going to show you how I did it. So for year 1, you do it the same exact way you did before, because year 1 is the base year. So the first one's going to look exactly like the last one, right? Year 1, we take 1 times 2 plus 1 times 1, and I get 3. That's my real GDP, right? We get 3. Now, for the second one, it's not going to be as easy. Now we take the new quantity for year 2, so 6 and then 6, but we multiply not by 3, but by the base year price. By the base year price. And then you're going to get a lower number than you had before, right? Because there was inflation. So we're not multiplying by the 3, that's a higher number, we're multiplying by a lower number. So 6 times 2, right? 6 times 2 gives you 12, and then 6 times 1 gives you 6. So now the real GDP is 18. Whereas before, what will we have? The real GDP was 3, just like we had before, and now it was 30 for year 2. That's the nominal GDP. The real GDP is actually deflated. We've deflated it to 18. Year 3, what do you do for year 3? Well, you take the new quantity 8 and you multiply by the base year number, right? So we're trying to find year 3, what is the real GDP? So 8 times 2 plus 10 times 1, that's what we have here. I got 26, and that's my real GDP. All right, I hope that makes sense. All right, the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP. So now we're not done. We can find the percentage change, the growth from percentage change from year 1 to year 2, from year 1 to year 2. Well, what do? You take the new minus the old. So 18 is the new minus 3. 18 minus 3 divided by 3, 15 over 3 gives you 5 times 100, 500%. Year 1 to year 2 increased 500%. What was the previous one? The previous one, year 1 to year 2, it was 900%. So it didn't increase as much as the nominal said it did. What about year 3? Year 2 to year 3. So year 2 to 26 and 18. 26 minus 18 over 18. 18 of this. 2 over 9 times 100 gives an increase of 22%. That's the increase of real GDP percentage change rate increase by 22%. The previous year, the nominal GDP was 73%. So clearly, the percentage change in the nominal GDP is much larger than the real GDP. All right, that's real GDP. We'll do deflator next. Okay, deflator is a pretty simple formula, and as long as you got the real and the nominal, you can get it. All right, thanks.